I always thought anniversaries were meant to celebrate love, but mine? It became the night I exposed my wife's affair, right in front of our closest friends and family. 15 years of marriage, and she brought him, her lover, into our home, smiling like nothing was wrong. She raised a glass to us, while sneaking glances at the man she'd been secretly sleeping with. But Rebecca had no idea. I wasn't the clueless husband she believed I was. For weeks, I watched every lie unfold, thanks to the hidden cameras I installed after I started suspecting the truth. And on that special night, I didn't just stay silent. I made sure everyone saw exactly who she really was, on the biggest screen in our living room. Now, before I tell you how I turned my anniversary into a night Rebecca will never forget, what would you do if your spouse humiliated you like this? Would you walk away quietly or expose them for everyone to see? Let me know in the comments, and stay with me, because this story is just getting started. I wasn't always the man who installed cameras in his own home. No, I used to be the kind of husband who believed that trust was the foundation of everything. My name is James Wilson. I'm a 42-year-old architect from Chicago. For 15 years, I thought I had built more than just houses. I thought I'd built a solid marriage with Rebecca. We met in our 20s, fresh out of college. She was ambitious, charming, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. And me, I was the guy who felt lucky just to be standing next to her. Our early years were good, great even. We traveled, bought our first home, supported each other's careers. Rebecca was my partner in every sense of the word, or at least that's what I believed. But if I'm being honest, the cracks didn't just appear overnight. They crept in slowly, disguised as late nights at the office, work trips, and a phone that was always face down. It really started about a year ago when Rebecca landed a big promotion, marketing director at one of the top firms in Chicago. I was proud of her. I told everyone how amazing she was, how she deserved it. But with that promotion came long hours, constant emails, and a new client named Mark Daniels. At first, I didn't think twice about it. I mean, we all have coworkers, right? But soon Rebecca's stories didn't add up. She'd mentioned working late, but her calendar showed no meetings. She'd come home wearing perfume I didn't recognize, saying it was a new brand from a client gift. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Because believing her meant holding on to the life we'd built, the life I wasn't ready to question. But then came that night. 3 months before our anniversary, I decided to surprise her with dinner at her office. It was supposed to be a simple gesture, just a husband showing support. When I got there, her car was in the lot. Lights were still on in the building, but her desk? Empty. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I asked the security guard if he'd seen her. He nodded casually and said, "Yeah, she left a while ago, with that tall guy from the third floor." My heart sank. I remember standing there holding that bag of takeout, feeling like the biggest fool in the world. I drove home in silence, replaying every excuse, every strange moment I'd brushed off. That was the night I stopped being naive. But instead of confronting Rebecca, I made a choice. A painful one. I decided to know for sure. Because if I was going to watch my marriage fall apart, I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. A week later, after a supposed break-in happened down the street, I told Rebecca we needed better security. She agreed without hesitation. Why wouldn't she? She thought I was still the trusting husband who'd never suspect a thing. By the end of that weekend, I had installed cameras in key spots, discreet, hidden in plain sight. And then, I waited. Every day felt like a lifetime. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that I'd wasted money on paranoia. But deep down, I already knew what I was going to find. The first time I saw Mark walk through my front door, I felt something inside me break. And when they disappeared into our bedroom, that's when the anger replaced the heartbreak. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal anymore. I was planning justice. And with our anniversary approaching, I realized Rebecca had just handed me the perfect stage. The thing about discovering betrayal, it doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in, slow, suffocating, until you're drowning in it. Every time I checked the footage, I hoped it would be the last. But Mark kept coming back. Once a week, then twice. Sometimes in the middle of the afternoon when I was at client meetings. Other times late at night, when Rebecca claimed she was too tired for me but apparently had enough energy for him. I counted 17 visits in just under 2 months. 17 times they walked into my home. 17 times they laughed, drank my whiskey, and defiled the bed where I once believed love lived. I could have confronted her after the first video. I could have exploded, demanded answers, thrown them both out. But that would have given them control, turned me into the angry, bitter husband they could spin stories about. No, I wanted more than just a confrontation. I wanted the truth to stand on its own, undeniable, inescapable. Then, like fate handing me a gift, Rebecca brought up our anniversary. "Why don't we host a party this year?" she suggested one evening, pretending like nothing was wrong. 15 years deserves a real celebration. I almost laughed at the irony, but instead I smiled and said, "That's a great idea, Rebecca. Let's make it a night to remember." From that moment, every detail became part of my plan. I upgraded the security system, linking the footage directly to our smart TV. I spent hours editing a compilation. Nothing graphic, but enough to make every guest in that room understand exactly what had been happening behind closed doors. The hardest part? Acting normal. For weeks, I had to sit across from Rebecca at dinner, listening to her talk about work, plans, even how stressed she was. She'd text Mark right in front of me, disguising it as business. Sometimes she'd kiss me goodnight and then sneak messages to him after I fell asleep. Or so she thought. Each lie sharpened my resolve. Each fake smile fueled the storm I was about to unleash. Then came the final twist. Rebecca told me she wanted to invite Mark to the party. "He's been such a big part of my success this year," she said sweetly. "I think it's only right." I looked her dead in the eyes and nodded. Of course, the more, the merrier. The days leading up to the party felt surreal. I wasn't nervous. I was calm. Too calm, maybe. Because when you've already lost everything, fear doesn't have a place anymore. Instead, I focused on precision. The guest list was perfect. Friends, family, colleagues, people who mattered. I prepared manila envelopes containing printed screenshots and a copy of the divorce papers, labeled neatly for both our parents. I packed my essentials quietly, storing my bags in the garage, ready to leave once the show was over. The night before the party, I stood in our living room, staring at the blank TV screen where it would all unfold. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who believed in forever. And I realized, sometimes endings are exactly what you need to find yourself again. When the night finally arrived, everything was set. Guests filled the house, laughter echoed through the rooms, and Rebecca played the role of the perfect wife, gliding from person to person, with Mark never far behind. I watched them exchange glances, subtle touches when they thought no one was looking. But I was looking, and soon everyone else would be too. As the evening wore on, people began clinking glasses, calling for a toast. Rebecca beamed at me, her eyes sparkling with deceit. "Say a few words, honey," she urged. 15 years. It's your moment." Oh, it was definitely my moment. I took a deep breath, raised my glass, and felt the weight of betrayal lift, because I knew that in just a few seconds, I wouldn't be the fool in the room anymore. I'd be the man who turned heartbreak into power. I stood there, glass in hand, feeling every pair of eyes on me. Friends, family, colleagues, even Rebecca, smiling like she'd just won some invisible game. 15 years of marriage. And this was how it was going to end. Not with a quiet conversation, not behind closed doors, but right here, under the warm glow of chandeliers and polite laughter. I cleared my throat and began, "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. 15 years. It's a milestone, isn't it?" People nodded, some raised their glasses. Rebecca leaned in closer, her hand resting on my arm, like we were still that perfect couple. "Marriage is built on trust," I continued, my voice steady, "on loyalty, respect, and honesty." I saw Rebecca's smile falter, just for a second. Mark shifted uncomfortably near the fireplace. "And tonight," I said, pulling the small remote from my pocket, "I thought it was only fitting to share a special highlight reel from this past year. Something that truly captures What these 15 years have meant, I clicked the button. The room fell silent as the TV flickered to life. At first, there was confusion. Grainy footage appeared, showing Rebecca opening our front door. Then Mark stepping inside, laughing, kissing her like he belonged there. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Wine glasses froze midair. Whispers turned into stunned silence as clip after clip played, Rebecca and Mark disappearing into the bedroom, lounging on the couch, sharing private moments in my home. Rebecca's face drained of color. Her hand dropped from my arm like it had been burned. "James, what is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer. The footage spoke louder than any words ever could. Mark took a step toward the door, but the eyes of 30 people pinned him in place. There was no escape, not from this. When the final clip ended, I lowered my glass and let the silence hang heavy in the air. Then I turned to the crowd and said calmly, "Everyone, I'd like to properly introduce Mark Daniels, not just as Rebecca's brilliant client, but as the man who's been in our home at least 17 times over the past 2 months." Gasps. Aunt Carol dropped her glass, the shatter echoing through the room. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Rebecca's father stared at her like he didn't recognize his own daughter. Rebecca reached out to me, panic flooding her face. "James, please, we can talk about this." I stepped back, pulling 2 manila envelopes from under the table. "There's nothing left to talk about." I handed one envelope to her parents, the other to mine. "Inside, you'll find everything you need to understand why this marriage ends tonight. Footage, dates, and signed divorce papers." Rebecca's mother burst into tears. Her father's jaw clenched as he flipped through the contents. My father shook his head in disappointment, not at me, but at the woman they once called family. Mark finally found his voice. "Look, man, it wasn't supposed to be like this." I cut him off with a glare sharp enough to slice through steel. "You've already said enough, with your actions." Rebecca collapsed onto a chair, her perfect world crumbling around her. She wasn't the poised, confident woman everyone admired anymore. She was exposed, vulnerable, and entirely responsible for it. I straightened my jacket, took one last look at the room, the faces of those who now knew the truth. "I've packed my things, Ra," I announced quietly. "Feel free to enjoy the rest of the evening. The house, and whatever's left of this farce, is yours." Without another word, I walked toward the door. I could hear Rebecca calling my name, pleading, but I didn't turn around. Because once you cross that line, once the truth is out, there's no going back. I stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: freedom. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a life where I would never be someone's fool again. Walking out that door wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the final step in a plan I'd been perfecting for weeks. You see, when you discover betrayal like that, you have two choices: react emotionally or respond strategically. I chose the latter. The night I saw Mark on my security footage for the first time, I knew anger wouldn't serve me. Throwing accusations, yelling, smashing things, it would only make me look weak, unhinged. Rebecca would twist the story, play the victim, and somehow I'd become the villain in my own tragedy. So I kept quiet. I watched. I documented everything. Every visit Mark made was logged. Dates, times, video clips, stored securely in cloud backups and on encrypted drives. I even printed still images, knowing that sometimes a picture hits harder than words ever could. But I didn't stop there. I met with a lawyer, quietly, discreetly, explained the situation, laid out my evidence. He was impressed, honestly. Told me most people come in with suspicions, not a fully documented case. Together, we drafted divorce papers that left no room for negotiation. Illinois might be a no-fault state, but when it comes to dividing assets and protecting my interests, proof of infidelity still carried weight, especially when reputation mattered to someone like Rebecca. I made sure the house, the one we both owned, would be signed over to her. Not because I was being generous, but because I knew it came with a hefty mortgage and property taxes she couldn't handle alone without my income. I transferred my personal savings into a separate account under my name only, something Rebecca hadn't noticed because she never bothered with our finances. She liked to spend, not manage. As for sentimental items, I quietly packed away what mattered most: family heirlooms, personal projects, photographs that actually meant something. Everything else, I left behind. Let her keep the designer furniture and the expensive decor she loved showing off. In the week leading up to the party, I also reached out to a few key people, my closest friends, a couple of trusted colleagues. Without giving too much away, I hinted that Rebecca and I were having issues. I wanted them to be prepared, not blindsided when the truth came out. But I didn't want pity. I wanted clarity. I wanted everyone to see Rebecca and Mark for who they really were, without me having to say a word afterward. The night before the party, I double-checked everything. The video compilation was ready. The smart TV connection was flawless. The manila envelopes were sealed and labeled. My bags were packed, sitting in the garage. I even booked a hotel room for a week, far enough away to clear my head, but close enough to handle any immediate fallout. And here's something I haven't mentioned yet. I left Rebecca a letter, not a love letter, not a bitter rant, just a simple note on her nightstand that read, "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I hope the memories were worth it." No signature, no need. When I walked out of that party, I didn't look back because I knew everything was already in motion. The next morning, I turned on my phone to a flood of messages, some from friends expressing shock, others offering support, a few from mutual acquaintances who admitted they'd seen signs but didn't know how to tell me. And then there were the calls from Rebecca, dozens of them, voicemails ranging from tearful apologies to angry demands for explanations. I didn't respond, not once, because when someone shows you who they truly are, your silence becomes the loudest response you can give. Over the next few days, my lawyer handled the formalities. Rebecca's attorney tried to reach out, but there was nothing to negotiate. Everything had been prepared, signed, and backed by undeniable evidence. I heard through mutual friends that Mark disappeared from the picture almost immediately after the party. Apparently, public humiliation wasn't part of his long-term plan. Rebecca, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces, alone. Her reputation, shattered, her carefully curated image of a successful, happily married woman, gone. As for me, I walked away with my dignity intact, my future in my own hands, and the satisfaction of knowing I didn't just react. I executed a plan that left no doubt, no mess, and no chance for her to rewrite the story. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but standing in the aftermath of everything, I realized it wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. The days following that unforgettable night were surreal. I watched from a distance as the fallout unfolded, quietly, without needing to lift a finger. Rebecca's world unraveled faster than I expected. By Monday morning, whispers had already made their way through her office. Turns out, when you humiliate yourself in front of 30 people, word travels fast, especially when some of those people are connected to your professional circle. I didn't have to say a word. Her colleagues, friends, even her boss heard about the video. And Mark? He resigned within days, probably hoping to escape the humiliation. Cowards always run when the spotlight turns on them. Rebecca tried to maintain her composure, posting pictures from the party with vague captions like, "Not every chapter ends the way you expect." But everyone knew. There's no social media filter strong enough to cover up betrayal. Her parents stopped defending her after reading every detail I provided. I heard from my mother that Rebecca's father was furious, not just at her infidelity, but at the sheer stupidity of bringing her lover into their marital home and flaunting it like no one would notice. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I extended my hotel stay for a while, not because I didn't have options, but because I needed space to breathe, to think without walls that echoed memories of a lie. Each morning, I'd wake up, grab a coffee, and remind myself that I wasn't trapped anymore. No more second guessing, no more pretending. Of course, Rebecca didn't give up easily. The calls kept coming, first apologies, then anger, then desperation. I remember one voicemail where she said, "James, we can fix this. It was just a mistake. Please don't throw away 15 years. A mistake? 17 visits in 2 months wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, over and over again. I never responded, because I knew any conversation would only serve her need for closure, not mine. About 2 weeks after the party, I ran into a mutual friend, Ben, at a coffee shop. He sat down across from me, shook his head and said, "Man, you really dropped a bomb that night." I smiled for the first time in days. Had to make sure everyone saw the truth. Ben leaned in, lowering his voice. "You know, people aren't talking about you like some victim. They're actually impressed." That stuck with me, because I hadn't thought about how others would perceive me after the dust settled. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wanted respect, and apparently I'd earned it. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Clean, efficient, exactly as planned. Rebecca kept the house, just like I arranged. From what I heard, she struggled to keep up with the payments. Mark was long gone, and without my income, her lifestyle quickly lost its shine. I won't lie. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing she was left with the consequences of her actions. But I didn't dwell on it, because true victory isn't watching someone else fall. It's rising above the wreckage they tried to leave you in. I moved into a new apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, a fresh start, both literally and figuratively. I poured myself into my work, took on projects I'd put off for years, and reconnected with friends I hadn't realized I'd been drifting away from during my marriage. It was strange at first, rediscovering who I was outside of being Rebecca's husband. But with every passing day, I felt lighter, freer. The last message I ever got from Rebecca came about 3 months later. It was a simple text. "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a moment before deleting it without replying. Because I was happy, not because of what I did to expose her, but because I walked away with my integrity intact. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. And as far as I was concerned, I'd already won. Looking back now, I realize that the moment I exposed Rebecca wasn't the true ending. It was the beginning of something far more important. For years, I defined myself by my marriage. I believed that loyalty, hard work, and love would be enough to sustain us. But what I learned is that no matter how much you give, you can't force someone to value what they never respected in the first place. Walking away wasn't easy. It never is when you've invested 15 years of your life into someone you thought you knew. But sometimes letting go is the most powerful thing you can do. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. People often ask me if I regret how I handled it, putting Rebecca and Mark on display like that. And my answer is always the same: no, because silence only protects the guilty. I didn't expose them out of revenge. I exposed them because truth deserves light, and I deserve freedom. Since then, I've rebuilt my life, not around another person, but around myself. I've learned to appreciate solitude, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the small signs when something feels off. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: trust is earned, not owed. And when someone shatters that trust, you don't owe them your silence, your forgiveness, or your continued presence in their life. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself dignity. And most importantly, you owe yourself the courage to walk away, even when it hurts. So to anyone listening who might be facing betrayal or questioning their worth in a relationship, remember, you are not defined by how others treat you. You are defined by how you choose to respond when they show you who they truly are. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you expose the truth or stay silent to keep the peace? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes sharing your story is the first step toward taking back your power. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like mine. Stories where the truth always finds its voice.